Welcome to Proudly Out of Line. I'm Mardi Moore, an old school dyke and the CEO of Boulder-based Rocky Mountain Equality. With everything going on around us in this world right now, it's the perfect time for all of us to be engaged, informed, and hopefully have a little fun along the way. On with the show. On with the show is what I just heard, and I'm so glad to be joined today in the studio by Ren Dawe. Ren, I've been a fan of yours personally and professionally for a while now, since you showed up in my life probably 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. Even went to your wedding. What a day of joy that was. But that's not why you're here today. You're here today because I have a series of questions that I want to ask you. And your name is Ren Dawe. What does the Q stand for? Queer?
Though it could. I wish it was the Q in the
In my
LGBTQ
mind, it
acronym.
always will be. But go ahead. What's your real name?
My real name is Ren Dawe, which is actually the middle name my parents would have given me if I was assigned male at birth.
So here you are making us laugh while they're coming for all your rights, all your medical care. Um, how does that work for you in your head? What's so important about comedy right now?
Oh my God, I think it's just survival. I think that you know this too, right? You always give me a good laugh, even on like the dark days, right? That I come in here
Mhm.
and y'all are kind of in the war room, if you will, and I think that the only way to be able to get the job done is through having a sense of humor. And for me, I think that in some ways, obviously, I wish these things weren't happening politically, but I have a profound sense of gratitude to be able to be accumulating these skills at the same time that a lot of this political stuff is happening because it's great meat for the grinder, you know? And it really does give a lot of content. And I always think back to it's a really beautiful quote from I'm blanking on his name, but he's one of the fathers of neuroscience. He's a Korean War vet, and he ran the first neurosurgical mobile army medical unit in the Korean War, and he was just in grueling conditions, and he said, the quote is, "I'm so grateful to be able to be here and be able to do as much good as I can in this place right now," and I think that's just such a fascinating take from someone that's quite literally in the trenches to be in that place of like gratitude and almost optimism about it. And obviously comedy is not necessarily brain surgery in the same way. It is not as stressful in that way, but for some people it might be. And I think that I am, I really try to kind of take that same attitude of just being like, I'm just really grateful to be able to be in a position that I can maybe like lighten the load for people if they're really needing that. And on the other side of the coin, if it's not that intense, then just here for a good giggle, and that's a great thing to be around for too.
People don't say giggle enough. I
I
appreciate
agree.
that you already brought giggle into this conversation. As you were talking about the attitude of gratitude, like in the worst of all conditions, uh, you made me think to the previous podcast, Kate Kendall, who's a
Mm,
great
mhm.
activist. One of her lines that just came back to me in that was, "We're so lucky to be here in this moment to do all that we can do."
Yes,
And to
exactly
keep
that.
that in mind and to help us get out of bed and like
Yeah,
who can I make giggle today,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Which may be the reason that you showed up today.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, well, obviously I showed up because the dazzling Marty Moore always brightens my day. But more than that, yeah, the affirmation that I wake up with every day is I'm so grateful for an abundance of opportunities to bring joy to others, knowing that in doing so, I can elevate the joy in my own life. And it's like the thing I say every morning, I say before every show. Like it's just really kind of puts me back in that place and helps me conquer, a fear or an awkward moment or like, oh my God, like naturally this is the day that like I'm having a nosebleed or, whatever, right? It just I feel like it gets me through those weird moments.
So you get afraid before you go on stage?
It's not necessarily afraid. It's certainly some shows. Yes, certainly. I had a show recently in Atlanta. This is a good example. It wasn't for the tour. and it was just me as a comedian. I got basically cold called by a club that I had always wanted to work at, and I was so excited, and I was so like kind of in disbelief that I was like, like I'm a paid comedian driving to this show that I've always wanted to do.
Wow.
And I get there, and everyone is, first of all, so funny, but also being pretty like transphobic in the green room, and I that's not necessarily uncommon. And I was so nervous. I just wanted to do a good job. The audience was rough. The, comedians are kind of rough. And I was like, oh man. And I went on stage and I like did my thing. I felt really good about my sets, and I felt like I was able to hold my own. And when I'm like in those moments of just total butterflies, really nervous, it's not so much just like a sense of fear. It's this other sense of anxiety as well that like comes with it. And I think that part of that is expectations of wanting to do well, or, trying to plan in the future, like what is this performance going to be, when what you need to be focused on is the present moment, connecting with the person in front of you, and being able to kind of just stay connected with yourself when you're in the spotlight, and on a timer, right?
And on a
And
timer.
yes. And I don't know. I think that something that really helps me is this. I visualize being at the top of a water slide, because when you're at the top of a water slide, like you're kind of tall, you're like pretty high up there, and you're kind of nervous, and there's that moment where you're like, oh my gosh, am I about to go down this slide right now? But once you go down the slide, you're having a great time, and you're hooting and hollering, you're having fun, right? And so I feel that way about shows, where it's like, this is not just like me being afraid of being at this, on top of a very tall ladder. It's like I am about to go down a water slide. I am so excited to have fun, and I'm so excited to have fun with like these people. And like you go down the slide, and once you're on, you're going.
Move through the anxiety.
Yeah.
Well, you must like anxiety,
Oh
because
yeah.
you're doing one of the reasons that I wanted to do this interview with you early on is that you are doing this national tour called Here to Pee. And I want you to talk about Here to Pee, why it's important. But when you talk about like going to Tennessee, where everything about you is probably outlawed, that would give me some anxiety. But why is it important that you're doing this? What was the brainchild behind Here to Pee? And what's it look like?
Yeah, all good questions. So yeah, we're an entirely trans lineup. The lineup does change, so we highlight local acts every stop of the way, and we donate 50% of our proceeds to LGBTQ nonprofits in each state, which is cool. I think that being able to highlight kind of grassroots, local, regional talent and activism is really important, because there's this really, really large sect of kind of middle ground advocacy, I would say, that does not have a lot of money and does not have a lot of resources. And certainly in the comedy community, these homies often don't have agents. Like these people aren't making a good living doing this, but they continue to do it and do great work. And so definitely wanted to come from a place to highlight those things, both kind of in activism and also just in the comedy community. So that was definitely a piece of the Here to Pee. And in practice, I think that I don't know. There was definitely I I don't really like being told like what I can't do, right? And so suddenly being in a position where people are saying, to stay in your lane, or stay in your state, or stay in your county, or stay in that building over there, and certainly don't go into this one over here. That really bugged me. And so I wanted to kind of do something about that. And then I just looked it up, and I was like, well, who is even, someone's done this before, right? And we couldn't really find anybody. There's a couple comedians, all white men, that had basically raced to see who could do it the fastest, who could perform in all 50 states the fastest. But we have no real record of an out queer person doing it ever. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but it seems like a metric that someone would have claimed, right? It seems like that title. And when I realized that nobody had done it, and I just kept digging and digging, being like, "That's impossible. Somebody's has to have done it." Um, Not finding that was kind of the kicker for me, because originally I was just going to plan to go to the states that had at the time, around this time last year, um, been proposing like anti-trans bathroom legislation, which was around 37 states. And I made the joke about, well, if it's already about 40 states, then we might as well do all 50. And little did we know that, right, like Trump was coming and all of that was, kind of ahead of us. But yeah, we just set out to do all 50, and we're only 4 states away from having booked all 50. So we're really close.
That's so impressive, and I just can't believe you're like, I went to New Mexico for the weekend, I'm exhausted. I can't imagine, like, traveling to New York and then the next night in Boston. I was watching you travel, and I'm like, "Oh my god," in the first half of the tour, I'm like, "I don't even know how you get up in the morning, to do all you do and have those full days." You just identified yourself as queer. So
Yeah.
how do you identify? Like, who are you?
Oh, who are you? That's a great question. I think that I love the umbrella term of queer because I have also said served like in the military. I have served as every letter in the LGBTQ alphabet, if you will. And yeah, I am now a happy pansexual trans man. I think that that's probably the most accurate description. But having been a lesbian and remain quite bisexual and as someone who is married to a gay man, I feel like queer is kind of the best all-encompassing identity there. But yeah, queer trans. It's like queer primary identity, trans secondary identity.
Okay, that's good. That's the first time I've heard that order. So thank you. I learn something new every day, and thanks for disclosing that. I'd never had asked you that question.
Huh.
Um, so you've been to bathrooms. You're here to pee,
Been to
obviously. The
bathrooms.
bathroom's down the hall.
Hmm.
Please just stay with me a little bit longer. But in other places where you've been here to pee, like tell me the wildest bathroom story in your travels the first 6 months of this year.
Oh man, there's a couple. I would say that certainly the most amusing was actually I had driven all night to get back to Colorado. And I was so tired. I finally get to the Colorado border. I pull over at the rest area. It's like, 3, 4 in the morning. And I go in there and I thought I was all alone and I wasn't. And I realized this because as I like sit down to pee, I hear just the most remarkable long like poop fart I have ever heard someone give in my life. It literally went on long enough for me to pull out my camera, hit record, and and
Wow.
not catch all of it. It would. I was just so deeply impressed. So even though it wasn't necessarily the most outrageous story, I've never heard someone fart for maybe a solid 2 minutes before in my life, and that was just a real treat. That was a really fun one. But probably the
So you're telling
most
people just go to the bathroom to go to the bathroom. They're not in there like doing other things.
apparent, yeah. I mean,
Really?
that's right. I would say most of the time. Probably the most outrageous bathroom story I have was not necessarily a bathroom. I was in Portland. I really had to pee in the middle of a show, but we were in the backstage essentially. Was we were kind of trapped because there was no way to get around the front to go to the only bathroom in the building without walking directly through stage. And so during the show, while I'm hosting the show, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I have to pee so bad, like so bad." And so I snuck out the back because there was like an exit to the alley in the back. I snuck out the back and I was like, "Whatever, I'll just pee in the alley." So like a professional, I go and I drop trow in the alley right at that moment. There's and now I should mention at this point now I am locked out. I thought I had propped the door, but because of this, the owner came out looking for me for a quick question, and I realized this before they see me. I kind of tumble over and I just land in a puddle of my own pee
Oh my
in the middle
God.
of a show. I know. And thank God they do not see me. And then I had to try to figure out what to do. I'm knocking on the door. Someone lets me back in. I'm now walking around like a cowboy with a big blister on in the middle of his legs because I'm just okay, my underwear is wet but my pants aren't and I can probably still save this. I know. Literally go to the bathroom, dispose of the evidence, come out and just free ball the rest of the show. Nobody knew.
Oh my God.
All for the want of a pee,
Um, Well, there you have it.
There you go. You asked
You're
for
like
it, fam.
yeah, that's it. Well, sounds like you pulled this one off. Have you ever bombed on stage?
Oh yeah, I love a good bomb. I think it's really important, and I think that people that don't think that good comedians bomb are not they're not giving credit to the art. You have to be trying new things that are really out there and really out of your comfort zone and are really new kind of strange thoughts. And if you're not reaching like enough, if you're not trying that much or trying new stuff that often, then yeah, you're not doing yourself a service.
I would agree with that. Like if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying.
Bingo. Yeah.
I say that to myself and to staff a lot. Um,
Yeah.
and I will call out my mistakes. Somehow we've gotten into this mindset, or I have, maybe others don't have it, and I just assume they do, where you're supposed to be perfect,
Hmm.
right? I'm supposed to be perfect at all times. So if I make a mistake, oh my God, what does that mean about me, who I am? What will others think about me?
Yeah.
And and I've seen that play out with employees
Hmm.
who it's like, can you just tell me you screwed up?
Right.
Because we can fix that. But if you turn that then into a lie, we can't fix that.
Right.
That like gets into some other areas that you probably need like,
Yeah. Don't sprain a hammy backpedaling. Just
yeah,
like
just like
focus, like fix the
yeah,
tire. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I think there's a lot to learn from mistakes for sure. Um, so you're young. I'm
Thank you.
yeah, you're young. I am old.
Is that true? Okay.
Yeah, but like comedy like plays through the middle, right? It's
Yeah.
not like I mean there's some jokes. If you're doing jokes that are only seen on TikTok, I'm liable not to have that.
Right.
But if you're talking like current events and things like that, like there's some common ground between age. What does the makeup of the people in the audience look like?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. It really is different, like venue by venue and place by place. I think that there's a huge kind of middle ground of comedy that's it's really popular within kind of millennial and Gen X community because I think that we came up right kind of post Seinfeld era, right? And so we grew up with comedy being really mainstream. And Gen Z now really likes comedy, but kind of in a different format because they're used to really, immediate quick cut type comedy. In fact, they're getting a lot more into sketch comedy, I would say, because of the presence of like, short videos, short sketches, short stories that are kind of enacted on an individual level. And so they're into comedy, but kind of their own version of it. And then, I'd say that kind of like Gen X beyond, right, kind of into boomer territory is like, they're also really big comedy fans, and they really like kind of old school campy stuff. And I really appreciate like a good old like kind of Dick Van Dyke type crowd because I'm quite physical. And I really enjoy being able to elicit some of that old school humor that sometimes younger audiences aren't going to clock as being an homage, if you will. But I still find that young people really appreciate physical comedy, and I think it's because it's lacking in a lot of the other comedy that they're absorbing, especially live.
I
So
love physical comedy. I'm
yeah,
like I love it. I
me
grew
too.
up with Carol Burnett and
Mm-hmm.
Lucille Ball. And like, oh my God, the whole chocolate thing with Lucille Ball. And like I still, and it just
That's such a good bit.
yeah,
Yeah,
I just think comedy cuts across like all ages. It can be cultural for sure,
yeah,
right? Race may, play differently,
yeah.
for sure. But um, one of the things that's in the news that I haven't been in a conversation with the comedian about or even said out loud is that I grew up like I'm old enough. I remember when Saturday Night Live started, and we would go to my friend's house on Saturday night, stay up so late
Yeah,
because they wasn't an early version,
right.
and you couldn't watch it the next
It
day
truly
on.
was
Yeah,
Saturday night.
it was
Yeah.
that night, and you needed to be home and ready to go. And one of the characters that I always like, I still laugh about in my head. I don't know that because of the culture right now, I couldn't laugh out loud about it with somebody else, but here we're gonna go.
Okay.
Is around Pat on
Mm,
Saturday Night Live,
mm-hmm.
and I never thought in then maybe when I was 12 or 13, I didn't know a transgender person. I can
Yeah.
say that, or if I did, I didn't know it. Um, but I didn't think of them as a transgender person. I just thought of them as like a nondescript person who had really poor social skills. You know,
Marty
and then
calling out the envy community.
oh boy,
That's so funny.
here I go.
No, it's okay. I share this with you. I
Yeah,
completely agree.
and then you're waiting the whole time to see if they're going to disclose if Pat is male or female,
Right.
right? And then they would have it set up perfectly with the response, and you would never know.
hmm
And so, and now I think the conversation, I've just read the headline this morning, but now the conversation is, like 20 years ago, that was funny. Do you think it's funny now? And like, how
Mm.
does comedy change? Or do you do comedy that targets like
Mm.
things like that? What does that mean as a
It's such a
comedian?
such a good question, and I love that you're like looking at it kind of through the lens of like, funny. Then can it like is it a timeless joke, right? And I think that that's a really like interesting question to pose it at any kind of like cultural pointed comedy, and especially at gender, because we've looked at cross-dressing as being both like comedic then, it's still comedic now, but like in what context are we putting the cross-dressing? Is it just funny inherently, or do they need to be doing something in it that is funny? Is it serving a funny purpose, right? And so one of my favorite examples to give on kind of in my opinion, the kind of the evolution around trans comedy is actually from Family Guy. There's a really early on we find out that Quagmire's mom is a trans woman, right? And she like literally transitions as kind of part of the show, and which I think is pretty, in some ways quite progressive to have had that character at all. But the joke that then is like made around her when this is first presented is that she slept with Brian, and Brian the dog, and of course, and Brian finds out that he's trans, and then he just throws up for 2 solid minutes on
Oh
camera.
my
Right, and that's the
God.
joke. Right, so that's the joke. And then a couple years later, we get a scene with Quagmire's mom, who's like Lois, like comes up and is just like, oh, like Quagmire's mom. She's like having dinner, and Lois goes, oh, I'm so sorry to interrupt you in your brave evening, having such a brave dinner. How's your brave night? And I think that that is such a grade A joke, because
Mm.
it's making fun of both the way that we do talk to trans people without making trans people the butt of the joke, right? It's not punching down that, like, oh, I'm so disgusted to have slept with a trans person. That's why it's funny. Like, that then kind of grew into, like, oh, this is now a little bit more of a nuanced joke that I think trans people can find really funny, when like people are like, "You're so brave." It's such a trope to me. I get that all the time, and so to have a joke that is making fun of that without actually saying that they're not brave, it's more over making fun of the way that cis people will get their panties in a bundle, if you will, like when they're talking to trans people because they don't know what to say. And that was a really beautiful kind of arc, I think, to see it be, both so transphobic and then also curated for a little bit more of a real and a like nuanced and, in my opinion, a much funnier joke. And so I think that, yeah, there's a real kind of curve that you have to skate, that you have to like surf a little bit. And for me, sometimes the butt of the joke is indeed like, haha, I used to be a girl. Right, and I still find that quite funny. One of my favorite jokes to run right now is, I had a dude lean over, and he was just such a dude, bro, and he was like, "Oh my god, you have the most beautiful handwriting that I've ever seen in my life." And it's like, yeah, how do you succinctly tell someone like, yeah, it's because I was a teenage girl, right? And I think that that's like kind of a funny. It's a quite a gendered joke. It is playing on tropes. It is, a lot of that punchline is indeed like, haha, I used to be a girl, but at the same time, I don't think it's necessarily like making fun of, the transness as being, super weird or bad or negative, and that's why that's happening. It's kind of an unspoken understanding that I have that then isn't being like communicated otherwise. And so I think that there's different reasons for it to be funny and still not be a punch down, while also having, I would say, a little bit more of like a simple content to the punchline. Yeah.
I love all those thoughts. So when you're done with this comedy thing in
Mhm.
50 years, what do you want the youth that are like listening to it
Mm.
to like, you're talking about timeless. So what of the work that you're doing now, like, haha, I'm a girl, that is funny, but I don't know if I'm supposed to laugh at it or not, right?
Yeah.
Right? Ooh, it makes me uncomfortable. Is that funny for me as a cis person?
Right.
I don't know. Will that be funny in 10 years? Maybe it is. And maybe, but like when this is all done, like what's the legacy of
Mm.
comedy? Your comedy.
I think that I would really like to follow in the footsteps of like my predecessors, right? A lot of the inspiration I draw from is from Moms Mabley and like that generation, I would say, of comedians, especially like black women in comedy quite early on. And Moms Mabley is a huge inspiration, especially for the tour because she was touring in the Jim Crow South, getting paid as a headliner, as like a woman and as a black woman. That's that's so deeply impressive and was doing so, just so expertly navigating somewhat dangerous situations, a lot of sundown towns, and in some ways converting a lot of people that held pretty stigmatized and racist beliefs, or sexist beliefs, and on top of that she was queer, and so I just have such a deep respect for Moms Mabley and just so many folks in that kind of in that wave of comedy where we would see kind of queer folks starting to really come in and make a place for themselves in kind of like published media, right? And like paid performance, as well as folks that were doing it, in areas that they were told that they were not welcome. And they were not only making themselves welcome, they were making other people feel welcome too. And I think that that's so important. And I think that it really helped shift a lot of culture. And there are Moms Mabley jokes that are, they're in some ways they're quite crude, but they really hold up. I was listening to like a record and like one of her, premiere jokes was like, oh, they brought out this man and, they wanted me to marry him and he was so ugly. God, he was so ugly. It hurt my feelings. And
That's
right, that's
ugly.
such, yeah, and it's such a great joke. It's so simple. It works for kind of everyone. It's not even necessarily punching down on anyone specific. It's while being a bit vain, it's just such a good joke to me, and it still holds up. It's like 50 years later, like we're still laughing at that joke. God, 70 years later. Yeah, really cool. So I'd say that is kind of a similar legacy that I would hope to follow.
I love that. Thanks for bringing Mom's Mabley into the conversation.
Oh
I
God,
didn't.
any opportunity I
Oh my God.
get. Not enough people know about Mom's Mabley.
I didn't know all those pieces, so thank you. Is there a joke right now that you're workshopping that you think is like like we're going to be talking about Ren Dawe and Mom's Mabley like in 50 years? Let's hear it. Which
Is
one are
there a
you
joke that
workshopping?
what am I workshopping right now? Oh gosh. Okay. So for the context of this next joke, it's very important that you know that I do not have erectile dysfunction. Brag, I know, but I say that because I still wanted to see if, as a trans guy, I could procure um, Viagra, and so I, do what any man would do, and I go to hims.com. And I am indeed a he him, right? Less of a like a he him like a man, and more of a he him like when you see a dog in a car and you're like, look at him go, So go to hims.com, instantly affirming I'm a him, right? And then we get the questions, and the questions are you a man? That's very easy. Yes. Next question, are you depressed? I'm trying to answer honestly, sometimes, right? Next question, are you unsatisfied with your sexual stamina? Also honest, sometimes, right? The very next day there is Viagra on my doorstep. Like, not kidding. I mean, it was just the fastest delivery humanly. This Kool-Aid man level speed, okay? I hear that he does come quick. And now I've just been hoarding enough Viagra to probably give like a hippo a heart attack, right? And you know what they say,
What?
if you give a hippo a heart attack, he's going to ask you to sit on his rock hard hippo dick. And so I did indeed try the Viagra because I know, like I was curious to see if it would work, and it did work. It does do something to trans men, which is exciting. It doesn't do as much as you would want it to. Kind of like, I don't know, I don't know if you've ever had the experience of having a cup of coffee if you're already on cocaine.
No, never. Next
No.
question.
Right, but it's, kind of like that. You're like, it did do something. I'm already up, but it did do something. And I think that it's just kind of really lovely that Viagra affirmed for me, it really it debunked kind of this whole standard I was living by. Because to be a man, gosh, what a concept! This whole time I just thought I had to, be as swift as a coursing river with all the strength of a great typhoon. Turns out I just needed a stable internet connection and seasonal depression. So
I think that that one's going to work really
thank
well.
you. That's been a fun one to.
And speaking about drugs, um, I've seen you on the internet getting a shot in the arm.
Yeah.
And like, how long is that needle?
Oh,
And in Trump's America, because I think in Trump's America, Viagra does get delivered that quickly.
correct.
I have a feeling that hormones won't be delivered as quickly, or maybe not at all.
Yeah.
So what is it like? How long's the needle is my first question, because it looks like it probably would hurt, and you're doing that all the time. All the
Oh,
time?
th-
Do you
oh,
do you wake
oh,
up in the
every
morning and
day.
like give yourself a shot, or what, like what is going on?
What did my brain do? Like Kesha, wake up in the morning, give myself a shot of testosterone. No, fortunately it is not as long as it used to be.
Which part is
Intramuscular,
not as long?
the needle.
The
Thank God.
needle. Okay.
Intramuscular needles are usually about an inch because it needs to like get up in that muscle, right?
A
I
male inch or a
have
female inch?
Non-denominational inch,
Okay. Okay.
non-binary inch, one gender inch. So those have to be a little bit longer. I have switched from intramuscular injections to subcutaneous injections, also known as sub-Q. And sub-Q just needs to get under the skin. And
That would be a good
sometimes
name for a comedian.
sub-Q.
Sub-Q, just under the skin.
You've just named my next special. That's so
There
good.
you go.
Just under the skin. That's cute. And sub-Q needles are maybe a centimeter. So much more tackleable. So even though, yeah, I think that like some people are more wary of doing sub-Q injections because you do it at an angle because you're getting under the skin. I find them so much more easy. Like, yeah, a centimeter at an angle, a lot easier than like an inch perpendicular. Yeah, and I do injections weekly, and I'm on a pretty low dose because I've been on T for 10 years next week actually.
Wow.
Which is really wild to think about. And so yeah, I think we're past most of the puberty that is what's expected.
I'll
God, I hope.
ask others about that.
Yeah.
So once a week,
Once a week.
little needle.
Little needle.
Is a centimeter smaller than an inch?
It is.
Okay, so
Thank
they said
goodness.
we were going to switch to the metric system when I was in fourth grade. It still hasn't happened.
I'm really
I
hoping
haven't
it does
caught up.
happen one
Yeah,
day.
I
I'll
think it
be, desperately behind the times when that happens, but I
mhm.
still want it for us. For the
Well, I'm still
world.
using Lotus software, and I hear there's something called Excel. So it's hard to keep up with all the changes that are happening. So it's fun laughing. I try to laugh often. That's one of the things that like I wasn't ever like the cutest kid. I know this is hard to believe, but I have a face built for radio, and so this is working out really well for me. But I've always used humor, and I sometimes
Yeah.
it was pointed out to me recently that when I could go deeper with intimacy, that I don't. I'll like drop a joke out
Mhm.
or come up with the song lyric,
Mhm.
and it annoys some people, especially people who are trying to be intimate with me. Do you use comedy that way? Is this what's going on with you, Ren?
Is this why are you now on why are you like this with Mardi Moore? Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. I was never the funny kid. I was never the class clown. I was never like this. I wanted so desperately to be the funny kid. I always had crushes on the funny people. I like wanted to be the funny people. I was not the funny people. And so I really like tried to to study it. Like I wanted it for me. Even though I didn't necessarily think that I was like comedian level. I just wanted to be funny in the room. And I still ended up using humor, usually much more like kind of dark, sarcastic humor at the time, as like kind of coping mechanisms, right? And then once I was really embraced by the queer community, I realized that gosh, gay people just have such a great sense of humor.
We're the funniest people, you know.
We really are the
We are the
funniest
funniest people.
people, and I think that there's really interesting differences between kind of razor sharp, pop culture laden, like gay man humor, if you will, and like compared to really, really sometimes really like empowering and really critical and I would say like really intellectual kind of lesbian humor that
Well,
I've
we are
seen
the
in media.
smartest,
It's
but go
true.
ahead with your story.
It's true. Y'all are indeed like kind of the architects of the community, if you will. Yeah, and so I got really enamored with kind of queer styles of comedy, and yeah, so I think that like those I really gravitated to, and then started using for my own means of kind of alchemizing really tough emotions, especially through my transition, because it was so much easier to turn it into a joke than it was to kind of deal with the fact that you're waiting on this table right now and they just misgendered you in every possible way that they could think to do, and that is in public, and I am mortified, and I also have 18 drinks that I have to get right now, and I have no time for this feeling. And so it's a lot easier to, instead of actually just metabolize that, to kind of alchemize it as well, Mr. Sir, ma'am, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and you just walk away, right? And they're kind of amused. It certainly settles them as much as it settles me. And I think that it really is kind of a spoonful of sugar to help whatever poison you just ingested go down.
That's so funny. You made me think of Peppermint Patty because that's one of my favorite lines. Yes, sir, ma'am. I mean, I love that line in Peppermint Patty.
Yeah.
As an old school dyke, I'm like, yes, that is right, sir. That person.
And I feel like that's also, to me, it's very reminiscent of MASH, and the way that like Radar would very sweetly,
With Klinger.
yeah, exactly, with Clicker, and then kind of with everyone else, because once he would get befuddled, he would just kind of
That's
accidentally use
right.
the wrong pronouns for everyone. And I think that for me, that show was so critical in my understanding of like what good gendered comedy could actually look like, especially with the character Klinger, because they would often not be, just throwing up that Klinger is in a dress. They would be like, Corporal, what did I tell you? No sundresses after 4 p.m.,
Right.
That's such a wonderful punch up, right? And so I think that, that's, yeah, that's where my mind goes to with that.
I hadn't even thought about that. You're like you brought up shows where we've talked about three things where I totally misgender.
Mm-hmm.
Not misgender, that'd be another name, but for a show. But missed
Yes.
the gender aspects of it. Like I watched MASH religiously
Mm-hmm.
um, because I also grew up during the Vietnam
Yeah.
War, watching bodies
Yeah.
come home every morning on my little black and white TV. Um, but I hadn't thought of that in context of trans community. So are you saying that in that piece that will be timeless because
Mm.
it wasn't going after Klinger as I don't know even what language they used. Cross-dresser might have been the
Yeah,
language.
they would have said like transvesticism is
Yeah.
why he would have been discharged from the military,
Right.
right? But yes, no, I think that it is as close to timeless as I can kind of foresee at this
Mhm.
point. MASH certainly had its, like flaws and errors, and at the same time, I think was so incredibly progressive for the time, and really shifted uh, a lot of like TV standards
Yeah.
now that we take for granted. But yeah, I think that MASH also did a wonderful job of showing really powerful like women in women in positions of power over men. That was like cool and new. It showed women pursuing sex for pleasure. It showed people kind of out of wedlock, or in kind of interesting situations of like there were even like there was like a group situation that was even showcased in an episode, and I think that was really wildly progressive for the time to showcase anything except for oh, we're in a loving marriage until a man cheats, and that was the only narrative
Mhm.
around kind of intimacy that we often had around TV at that time. And so much about gender, so much about sex. They even had a wonderful episode where they, kind of petitioned to give a proper nurse title to a man because they wouldn't do so in the military at the time. And when that man was like, I am a nurse and I'm very proud of being a nurse, and so I think that there was a lot of really fun gender commentary, some of which was humorous and some of which was really like on the nose and like part of the plot.
Wow. Mash. Maybe that's
Mash.
what I'll do this weekend.
Mash.
I hear it's going to be hot
It's like
again,
my
so
favorite.
I
I
love
could
that.
I could literally talk about it all
I
day.
love that. When you were talking, and I was thinking about like who they targeted, and it
Hmm.
wasn't really Klinger. It was Hot Lips.
Yeah.
There was sexism, and I'm glad
Yeah.
you like pointed out the other, but there was a lot of like
Oh, for
sexism
sure.
was alive and well in that. But
Yeah.
they balanced it out. I didn't remember the male nurse episode.
No, and you're completely correct. I mean, there's certainly a lot of like sexism that's really flagrant in it, and I appreciate that the show attempts to call it out a couple times as well, where like Houlihan will indeed be like, "Hey, that's sexist," or like, "You cannot speak to me this way," or they really do show that sometimes, um, there would be men in power that would like kind of want to take advantage or assume that they were in a position to do so, and showing women rejecting them, both comedically and also really just kind of digging their heels in and being like, no, I'm a professional, thanks, and I think that that was so cool to get to
Yeah,
see, because that was pretty rare. you
yeah.
know
Oh, I think she died this year.
yeah.
I think we just lost her. I
Hmm.
can't remember her real name. She'll always be Margaret or Hot Lips to me.
Loretta Swit.
There you go. Thank
Hmm.
you very much for remembering that. Um, so we've covered a lot of ground. Um, what I have a question, and
Mm.
you may like you can not answer it. You can not answer any of these. Well, not all of them, but some of these. So I think you said something that has stuck with me through the conversation,
Mm.
which is, the handwriting. Well, when you raised a girl, or one of your jokes around that. So one of the things that I face in community is educating um, old dykes, older than me even, like around non-binary or
Mhm.
what she was a cool lesbian and now she's a trans man. Like I
Yeah,
don't get it,
the classic pipeline.
right? The classic
Mhm.
pipeline. Um, so give me some. What do you miss about, if anything,
Oh, what do I miss about being a girl?
about well, no, about being a
About
lesbian?
lesbian. Oh, well, that's certainly better than just being a girl. You're right. Wow, no one has ever asked me that. That's such a
Well,
fun
it's like a
question.
risky question to
Yeah,
ask,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. No, you're right. Wow. Oh gosh. I'm
Tool belts.
tool belt. I had a really hot tool belt. No, it was probably the boots.
Boots.
The boots, man. Like everybody's got like, you could have your like good lesbian power boots,
Yeah.
right? Like that's so important. I had a really good pair of Timberlands, and they were like my kitchen boots because they had really great traction, so they could like find traction even in grease on linoleum,
Mhm.
and I miss putting on my like lesbian power boots and being like, these are my lesbian power boots. I suppose I could still do that, but it doesn't hit the same.
Mhm.
I miss that. Genuinely, on like a vulnerable note, I really miss being in kind of like the sisterhood, if you will. I really miss being
Mhm.
in like women only spaces. And it's a fair price to pay for like right now I'm quite cis passing, if you will, and I really try to not take up that space. And a lot of times they are still really welcoming of trans people, but I still feel like often a bit of either a traitor or an intruder if
Mhm.
I'm in those spaces.
Wow.
And
Those are heavy words.
yeah, and I don't know. I really do miss that air of like community. And there was an air of safety, that you could really kind of like in some ways let your guard down, after having to keep up this pretense, in front of male coworkers or friends. And I genuinely do miss being in some of those spaces. And when like my friends have like a little kind of like girls' night, and they'll do like little face masks and crafts, and like drink wine and just like talk whatever. Like I just like I'm sad that I don't get necessarily invites to those. I really want to be able to respect that is like needed for them, right? And that I don't necessarily like. I don't want to say belong in those spaces, but that it's not as important that I take up that space in that space with them. It's important that they have it. And so I think that, yeah, I certainly miss that aspect of being a lesbian for sure.
So, also in your day job, you work for an organization called You Can Play.
Hmm.
And so I wasn't going to ask this question, but I'm going to because you led me right down the alley where,
I know.
I've got to
I
ask.
know. I like felt it too. I was
Did you
like, I was
feel it?
like, here we go.
Oh, here we go.
Hmm.
So, trans girls in sports,
Yeah.
right? So you've made a couple of comments like I don't go for the manicure or the facial like I used to, and I miss that because that's that space. How do you negotiate girls in sports based upon that way of thinking?
Yeah, on like kind of gender segregated sport, right? I think that this is just a way more nuanced topic than people want to admit it to be. And I think that beyond that, there's shockingly simple answers for a lot of these issues. Usually, it has nothing to do with gender, right? One of the examples I love to give is, we had a young boy, young cis boy, who was, gosh, I mean, he was so incredibly talented as a hockey player. Went into a pro league at the age of like 15 because he's just as good as all of those other players in his skill, but he was 15. He was tiny, and he gets clobbered on the ice and he got injured in his first game. And that doesn't mean that he's not skilled enough to play with those people, but at the same time, it means that what is actual skill in this game? What are the components of like, your competitive edge in this game? Is it just how fast you can skate? Is it how quickly you're able to maneuver the puck in the ice? Is it how big you are, as like kind of like a linebacker quality, if you will, for like an outfielder, right? Like, is it how aggressive you could be out there? Is it, indeed how small you are and how you're able to get through tight spots, tight positions, and so we look at different players for different purposes on the ice. I think that we also need to be looking at games for and sports in their entirety for what is fair, fun, and competitive, as well as what is equitable, right? And a lot of times it doesn't mean, just taking, that 14-year-old boy and putting him back in a, 14-year-old class. Sometimes it means, oh, maybe we need to have a pro league that's based off of a weight or size class division. So that way we're, putting people up against each other that are more evenly matched. And so I think that when we're talking about gendered sport in an aspect of fairness, we're neglecting a lot of other physical aspects that are way more integral to your ability to, win, to your ability to compete, and also your ability to be safe and to keep your fellow athletes safe, right, out there on, on the field or on the ice or whatever you're doing. So when we're looking at competitive sport that way, I think that it removes kind of the gender content of the conversation, and suddenly it's a lot it's a lot easier to not be sexist or transphobic if we're looking at actual physical elements that, add to a game instead of just they're a woman or are they, that isn't actually that helpful when we're looking at, what is going to be more fair in this game. So yeah, I would say that, overall, if I could give some like pro tips for like trans athletes in sport, obviously we want more co-ed teams. Obviously we want more, more opportunities in sport. I would say that opportunities for, professional athletes are already slim. Opportunities for, women to even be in those sports are slim. Opportunities for trans people are the slimmest. And so to deny people opportunities to be able to engage in sport or compete when the road they have to get there is already so fraught with competition and struggle. um I don't actually think it makes a game more fun, fair, or competitive to disallow certain types of people. I think we should be looking at like how we should allow people, right, to play a game and to be able to do so at higher competitive levels, because that is fun and it provides better economic opportunity for people too. So yeah, I really enjoy the work because it it's just kind of different every day, and every sport is a little bit different, and I think that helps me keep a bit more of an open mind. Yeah.
Nuanced for sure, isn't
hmm
it?
hmm
I've talked to good people who are on both sides of the issue, and it's like, how do you have those conversations before they show up at the voter booth?
Yeah.
Um, so thanks for sharing that
Yeah.
perspective with me and the listeners. So, wow, what a great conversation. Now, this is my favorite part of the show.
Mm.
I've named it A Minute with Marty. And this is rapid fire. I
Rapid
mean,
fire.
I know you're a comedian, so I don't have a lot of fear for you, but
Okay.
we're going to see. I want to know where your favorite pride is held.
My favorite pride is held in Denver, Colorado.
Oh,
Yeah,
all right,
I know,
Denver.
hateful. I thought about it, but it was hateful.
That Denver's a great pride. They do
Yeah,
a super job.
it's true.
I would agree with that. So some guests I ask about favorite hotels, but I know how you travel, so I'm going to change this. Where's your favorite campsite?
Congaree National Forest, South Carolina.
South
Yeah.
Carolina. I'm going to throw in a little one in it. So I know your favorite song about West Virginia is Country Roads. I
Mm-hmm.
just know it. I've seen you light up when they play it. How about your favorite song about Colorado?
Mm.
Is there one?
Is there one?
I'll come back to that one. I don't know that
Oh,
there is.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Actually, it is Billy Joel's New York, because he has that wonderful line about like I've been high and under the evergreens in the Rockies, and it's so good. So I'll include that one.
Okay, that's good. That's very good. I'll have to listen to that next. Your favorite queer icon?
Oof. Favorite queer icon. We'll go Mom's Mabley.
Oh, here we go.
That callback. Yeah.
Favorite band?
Favorite band. I'll say Shaky Graves or Tyler Childers Ensemble.
Oh my goodness. Favorite movie?
Victor Victoria.
And then this one's usually the toughest one. Your favorite podcast host?
Oh, well, obviously it's now Mardi Moore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you passed those. The Minute with Marty is over. And Ren, I want to thank you so much for making time in your really busy schedule. I know how much you do and how much good you're doing in the world. So thanks for making time for us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Always a delight.
And I think that you fit the name of this show really well. Proudly Out of Line.
Proudly out of line. Thank you so much for having me.